Welcome to Life Stories. What would you do if one small act of kindness cost you the only roof over your head, but gave someone else their memory back? Tonight, we follow a boy with nothing to lose, and a woman who's already lost everything, except a name around her neck and a hope she doesn't understand. One bike ride, one frozen evening, one decision that spirals into something far bigger than either of them could imagine. This isn't just about survival. It's about the moment you realize the road you chose, even in the dark, might just lead you home. Stay with us, because what begins as a sacrifice becomes a revelation, and it all starts right here. The wind bit sharper than usual that evening, the kind of cold that slid beneath your skin like a warning. Snow hadn't yet fallen, but the sky held its breath the way a city does before the first storm. On the west edge of Darrington, a town that had long since stopped trying to impress itself, a boy in a torn hoodie pedaled his rusted bicycle like his life depended on it. Because, in a way, it did. Mullick Harris had 18 years behind him and not much else. No parents, no backup plan, just a delivery job that paid enough to keep a roof over his head 6 nights a week. 7 if he skipped dinner. His backpack bounced against his spine as he rode, filled with one last parcel, a pharmacy delivery due by 8 p.m. sharp. If he made it on time, he'd have just enough for this week's rent at the Fluff House on Monroe. If not, well, there was a reason he kept an emergency blanket in his bag. As he passed the old bus stop near Ash Grove and 13th, something caught his eye. Most people didn't even notice the stop anymore. It hadn't been in service since the transit cuts 2 years ago. But there she was, an old woman, small and still, standing beneath the flickering street lamp, as if waiting for something that would never come. She looked out of time, wrapped in a faded coat that once might have been designer, a soft wool scarf fluttering loose in the wind, and a leather handbag clutched to her chest like a shield. Her silver hair was unkempt, her eyes darting at each passing car with a quiet, desperate hope. Nobody stopped. Nobody even slowed. Mullick did. His brakes squeaked as he rolled to a halt. He hadn't meant to stop, not really. There was no time. But something in her posture pulled at him. It wasn't just that she was old or confused. It was the way she looked at the road like it had betrayed her, like she'd once known where it led, and now it was all foreign. "Ma'am," he said gently, stepping off the bike. "Are you okay?" She turned to him with eyes that blinked like static. "Ashgrove Lane," she said slowly, as if tasting the words. "Or was it Birchfield? The bus didn't come. I think I missed it." "The buses haven't come here in years," Mullick replied, careful not to sound pitying. "Do you remember where you live?" She opened her purse with trembling fingers, revealing lipstick, tissues, a polished stone, and a bus transfer dated 3 days ago. No address, no ID. He was about to call the non-emergency number when he saw it. A pendant hanging around her neck, barely visible beneath the scarf. He leaned closer, engraved on the back, E. Hart, 17 Ashgrove Lane. His breath caught. That was a 2-hour ride, uphill through the most unforgiving part of town. He checked the time, 7:34 p.m. If he missed the pharmacy drop, his room was gone. The math was brutal, so was the silence. Then Evelyn Hart looked up at him, her eyes soft with confusion and trust, an expression that reminded him of his little sister before she was taken into foster care. He exhaled. "All right," he said, "we'll get you home." She smiled as if he'd just offered her the moon. He bundled her on the back of his bike, wrapped her in his only jacket, and paddled into the night. The ride was brutal. Hills that felt like walls, roads that vanished into dark fields, wind that cut through his sleeves like glass. But he kept going. She hummed behind him, broken tunes, half-remembered lullabies, and asked the same questions over and over. "Are we close? Do you know my son? Wasn't there a bakery here once?" Mullick answered them all, each time like it was the first. By the time they reached the white iron gates of 17 Ashgrove Lane, it was nearly 9:30. The house behind them was enormous, silent, and cloaked in ivy and shadow. It looked like the kind of place that didn't get visitors. He knocked once, then again. A man answered, older, dressed in a robe with panic in his eyes. And when he saw Evelyn, that panic cracked wide open into something else. "Miss Hart," he whispered. "Oh, thank God, we've been searching everywhere." Evelyn blinked, then smiled softly. "I went for a ride," she said, resting a hand on Malik's shoulder. "He brought me home." The man, Charles, a caretaker, tried to usher Malik inside, offered him dinner, a ride back, money, but Malik shook his head. "I just wanted her safe." He scribbled his number on a receipt and handed it over, in case she ever needs help again. And then, he left. The ride back was quieter, colder. By the time he returned to Monroe Street, his hands were numb and his legs trembled with each pedal stroke. But the real chill came when he saw it. His belongings in a garbage bag beside the locked door. A sign taped over the handle in thick black marker. "Past due, locks changed." No yelling, no second chances. Just the end. He didn't cry, he didn't knock, he just turned and rode. Eventually he wound up behind Johnson's grocery, where he sometimes restocked shelves for a couple bucks in a sandwich. The back light was still on. He knocked once. The door creaked open. Mr. Johnson stood there in a flannel robe, holding a steaming mug. He took one look at Malik, shivering and silent, and stepped aside. "Storeroom's dry," he said. "Cot's in the corner. Don't die in your sleep." Malik smiled weakly. "Thanks." He curled up under the thin blanket, the cold creeping into his bones. But in his chest, something unexpected stirred. A flicker of peace, of worth. He didn't know that miles away, a woman sat awake in a grand empty house, holding a torn receipt with his number, whispering his name into a room that hadn't heard laughter in years. What do you do when a stranger sees your worth before you can? Could you accept help not as pity, but as recognition? The next morning, a black car would roll into Johnson's grocery, quiet as snowfall, and change everything. The smell of citrus and cardboard still lingered in the storeroom when the soft chime of the front bell stirred Malik from a restless sleep. He sat up slowly, groggy but alert, every muscle sore from the previous night's ride. The cot creaked beneath him as he swung his legs down and rubbed his eyes, half expecting the cold from the concrete floor to have turned him to stone. He padded toward the front of the store, where the first pale light of morning spilled through the windows like warm breath. Mr. Johnson was already up, dressed in his usual denim apron and wool cap, sipping his bitter coffee like it owed him money. Without looking up, he slid a banana and a lukewarm cup toward Malik across the counter. No small talk, no questions. Just that quiet brand of mercy Malik had come to recognize from men who had once needed it themselves. Malik murmured thanks and peeled the banana slowly, watching the street begin to stir. Steam rose from manhole covers. The sky, though still heavy with cloud, had lightened just enough to hint at another long, cold day. Then the car came. It glided into view so smoothly it barely made a sound. Black, polished, and wrong against the scuffed sidewalks and flickering street lamps of Darrington. Malik didn't need a second guess. The man who stepped out was tall, sharply dressed, with the kind of posture that came from years of giving orders. He paused at the door, glanced at a folded paper in his hand, then pushed inside as the bell gave a quiet, almost reverent chime. "I'm looking for someone named Malik Harris," the man said, voice low but commanding. Malik stood up slowly. "That's me." The man offered a nod. "My name is Charles. Miss Evelyn Hart asked me to find you. She remembers everything. She insisted I bring you back to speak with her, if you're willing." Malik's grip tightened around the paper cup, knuckles going white. A part of him wanted to say no, to disappear into the stockroom and pretend last night never happened. "I didn't do it for thanks," he said quietly. "She was lost, that's all." Charles studied him with eyes that were too calm, too patient. "She believes you helped her find more than her home. She'd like to speak with you, not out of gratitude, out of recognition." Mr. Waite Johnson looked up for the first time, eyebrows raised, then gave Malik a small, tired shrug. "Go," he said. "The cot'll still be here." Malik hesitated only a second longer before nodding. He gathered his bag, zipped his jacket, and followed Charles out into the street. The inside of the car smelled like pine and leather. The warmth in the seats hit his back like a revelation. As they passed the town's edge, Malik saw the world he knew retreat behind them. The cracked sidewalks, the corners he delivered to, the alleyways where he sometimes slept when no cot was available. It all seemed impossibly far away now. Ashgrove Lane in daylight was unrecognizable. The house was even bigger than he remembered. White stone walls stretching skyward, windows glowing softly with morning light. It looked less like a home, and more like a world unto itself. Charles led him through a side entrance, past tall ceilings and quiet hallways, into a sunroom that smelled of lavender and books. And there, seated in a chair facing the window, was Evelyn. She looked nothing like the lost woman he'd found beneath the street lamp. Her hair was brushed, her eyes clear, her clothes carefully chosen. But her smile, that familiar warmth, bloomed the moment she saw him. "You," she said, her voice trembling just enough to betray the depth behind it. "You brought me home." Malik nodded, unsure what to do with his hands. "You remember?" "I remember everything," she said. "Every turn, every word. You didn't just help me find my house. You helped me remember who I used to be. And I want to offer you something." She reached beside her chair and handed him a folded envelope. Inside, a note written in elegant script, an invitation to live at the estate temporarily. A room, a modest stipend. And at the bottom, a line that made Malik's breath catch. "We'd like to help you return to school, if you still want that." Malik stared at the paper, then at Evelyn, who waited, not with expectation, but with a quiet hope that struck something buried deep in him. I don't know," he said. "I don't want this to be charity." "It's not," she said gently. "It's a door, one you've already earned." For a long moment, the room held its breath with him. Then he asked, almost afraid of the answer, "Why me?" She didn't hesitate. "Because you stopped when no one else did, because you listened when the world was too busy. And because I see something in you I lost in someone I loved." Malik looked back at the envelope, its corners trembling in his fingers. What she was offering wasn't just shelter. It was a second chance at a life he hadn't dared to want. But taking it meant stepping out of the only world he'd ever known, and into one where he might have to confront a different kind of loneliness. The kind that comes when you realize someone finally sees you. And now you must decide if you're ready to be seen. When someone opens a door you never believed was meant for you, do you walk through it, or shut it out of fear? Later that night, Malik would discover that Evelyn wasn't the only one hiding secrets in that house, and that not all offers come without a cost. Stay with us for part 3 of the story. The days at the Hart estate moved slowly, like sunbeams through lace curtains, quiet, deliberate, and filled with a kind of peace Malik had never known before. His room overlooked the garden, where stone paths meandered between rose bushes and winter ivy. In the mornings he'd wake to the soft chime of porcelain, as breakfast was laid out, always simple, always warm. And every afternoon, Evelyn would wait for him in the sunroom, where they talked about everything and nothing at all. He told her about the mother he barely remembered, about nights spent on rooftops to escape the heat in foster homes, about the way a cheap cup of gas station tea could feel like salvation. She listened with the attention of someone unlearning the world as she knew it. Sometimes she'd close her eyes, not out of fatigue, but to imagine his words more vividly. One crisp Saturday morning, as frost still clung to the hedges, she surprised him with a box, small, carved from dark wood. Inside was a key. Its tag read Studio East Wing. "It's yours," she said, "for what you're building next." "What am I building?" Malik asked. She smiled. "That's for you to tell me." The studio was a forgotten room, dusty shelves, sunlight cutting across old floorboards, canvases stacked against walls like memories waiting to be claimed. He cleared the space slowly, carefully, until it began to feel like something that belonged to him. Something permanent. And then came the night that changed everything. It started with a letter. He found it tucked into a drawer of Evelyn's writing desk while looking for extra stationery. The envelope was brittle with time, but unopened. On it, "For Lucas, when he's ready." Lucas, the name Evelyn whispered sometimes in her sleep, the name that made her eyes darken when mentioned. Malik held the envelope in his hands for a long time. He shouldn't open it. It wasn't his. But something in him, some whisper of instinct, urged him forward. He slit the edge carefully. The letter was short, written in a tight, trembling hand. "Lucas, I'm sorry I let you go, I thought I was doing the right thing. I was scared of you leaving, of me failing. I chose pride over love, and it's my oldest regret. If you find this, I hope you're still kind. Still soft in the way your heart always was. Maybe even brave enough to forgive me. Love, always, Mom. Malik read it 3 times before he set it down, his fingers shaking. He didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Evelyn was sitting by the window, a shawl draped around her shoulders, humming an old jazz tune. When Malik stepped into the room, her eyes lit up the way they always did now. But this time, he didn't sit. He knelt beside her, held her hand. "Evelyn," he said gently. "Who was Lucas?" Her eyes didn't blink, but the smile slipped. "He was my grandson," she said softly. "He left when he was 16. I said things I didn't mean, hurtful things, and he never came back." Malik nodded slowly. "What if he did?" Her lips parted. "What do you mean?" He reached into his jacket and pulled out the pendant she had worn the night they met. He had kept it tucked away, not meaning to keep it from her, but never quite sure how to return it either. He handed it to her now, and then, slowly, quietly, he asked, "Evelyn, was Lucas adopted?" She stared at him. Then something inside her broke. Not with violence, but with the trembling stillness of recognition. The way her hands covered her mouth, the way her shoulders folded inward, like the world was pressing against her from all sides. "No," she whispered. "No, that's not." But her voice faltered. "I found my adoption papers a few years ago," Malik said, voice shaking, "before the home burned down. My mom never talked about it. I never asked." He held out a small piece of folded paper, half scorched at the edges. One name, faint but visible. Lucas Malik Hart. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was reverent. Evelyn reached for him as if trying to touch time itself. Her hand hovered over his face like she was afraid he might vanish. "I thought I'd lost you," she said, her voice barely there. "I thought I'd buried you in my shame." He took her hand, pressed it to his cheek. "You didn't lose me. I was just late." And in that room filled with old books and forgotten sorrow, something ancient and broken found its breath again. In the months that followed, the Hart estate changed. Malik didn't just stay, he grew. He enrolled in school, took up design and urban planning, driven by the idea that no kid should sleep on concrete in the winter again. Evelyn backed his vision, and together they launched the Heartlight Initiative, a foundation not for charity, but for transformation. They built community centers, night shelters disguised as art galleries, programs that taught resilience without requiring tragedy as proof of worth. And every Sunday, Evelyn would sit in the garden and watch Malik lead youth workshops under the trees, her eyes soft with the knowledge that this wasn't just redemption. It was legacy. Years later, when Evelyn passed quietly in her sleep, the town mourned her as the matriarch they never really knew. But Malik, now 25, knew better. She hadn't saved him. He had saved her too. In her will, she left the estate to him. But the real gift had come long before that. In the moment they chose to see each other not through the lens of blood or shame or debt, but through love. Malik still keeps the pendant in his pocket. Not because he needs proof of who he is, but because it reminds him of the night he chose compassion over comfort, and found a home in the most unlikely place. What stayed with you most from this story? Was it the ride, the reunion, or something in between? If this story touched you, comment 100 below. Tell us, where are you watching from? Share this story with someone who believes in second chances, and thank you for being here with Life Stories.